While the traditional business person oftentimes can access their own distribution channels, they can go out into the marketplace and make their own sales and really control that pipeline. As a filmmaker, traditionally, we didn't have that opportunity. If we wanted to get our feature films out into the marketplace, we would have to go through a middleman, a third-party distributor, somebody that came up to you and said, listen, I'm going to take your movie out into the marketplace. And then you could be like, oh, but your deal really stinks. And it's like, tough, kid. You're not going to get your movie sold with me. You're not going to get it sold anywhere. And that means that you don't get into the marketplace without getting permission, without asking permission and hopefully getting out there. So what happens? You get to go back to your day job. Here's the good news. And as I told you earlier, I'm here to really add a lot of optimism and give you guys some promise as you take that next step towards your feature film and getting it out into the marketplace. And here's what you have. You now have the ability. Production quality has gone up, and it's become more and more inexpensive. For those of you that think that camera doesn't look robust, you can always add some stuff to it, and now it looks like a real film camera. The other part of this, the equation that's just so amazing that I don't know why more filmmakers aren't running into the streets, except I haven't talked to them enough, running in the streets with celebration, is these marketplaces are accessible. The world is going increasingly video on demand, which means that you now have the ability from your computer not only come home with your HDSLR content, edit it on your computer, but now you can upload it to a marketplace and begin selling that. Can we just have a round of applause? And I'll give you some tactics on how to do that, but let's not forget that things are evolving. You get a lot of people out there that are scared of this. I'm here to tell you this is awesome stuff. So you get it out in the marketplace, and it's accessible, and we can all celebrate. And next time this guy comes up to you and he's like, I'm going to get your movie into iTunes, you can say, so what? I can get my own movie into iTunes, and I know why, or I know how, and I know why I'm going to do that. It's kind of cool, right? It's liberating. It's so awesome. We never had this before. This is good stuff. So, here's a little bit of a challenge. You're not the only person who's ever seen this talk, and I imagine if any of you have done your research, you know that you're not the only filmmakers who know this stuff. And what's increasingly becoming challenging is everybody has a factory. Everybody's a filmmaker. Everybody can grab a camera and create content, and a lot of people are, and a lot of people are creating feature films. So what that means for you is this product that you used to produce that you could sell for $100, because the market's saturated with all sorts of supply, and we probably all heard that expression before, it's that economic thing, supply and demand. When there's a lot of supply, the demand goes down a little bit, and with it, the price goes down. So there's not as much scarcity anymore. So that thing that used to sell for $100, now it's $47. Oh, wait, now things have gotten even increasingly cheaper. And now you're selling that thing for $17, right? So that's interesting. So how do we compete with that? Well, again, some good news. We are now entering the era of entrepreneurial filmmaking. So when you think of yourself, don't just think of yourself as an independent filmmaker. I would venture to say that you should think of yourself as an entrepreneurial filmmaker. Can we just repeat after me, even if you think it's goofy, you don't have to really. But yeah, actually, yeah. I am an entrepreneurial filmmaker. Anybody like the ring of that? It kind of feels good because you're like, I'm going to take it. I'm going to go after this thing and I'm going to make it happen because I'm an entrepreneur. Nothing's going to stop me. I feel pumped even saying that stuff. It's awesome because this is what's happening. Before you were an independent filmmaker, you didn't have access to the marketplace. Now you're an entrepreneurial filmmaker. Oh my gosh, now it's my job to figure out how to get to the marketplace. And so what you're experiencing now with the market, with a whole bunch of competition and a whole bunch of ability to get that movie that you're creating out into the marketplace, out in front of your audience, is no different than any other business. It's just the barriers to entry used to be a lot higher, which made films scarce, which meant that it was a little bit easier to get in the big theaters if you were playing at that level. So, here's step number 1. Sharpen your hook. Like a lot of you, I sat around, I made quite a few short films before I made a feature. I described one early on, for those of you that were in the room early, 16 millimeter stuff. I worked with the same group of friends, and we probably put together a good dozen short movies, eventually leading to video and all that kind of stuff. But we sat around one afternoon, not too long after the HollyShorts Fest. I was in this festival back in 2004 with our short, and we made our first feature in 2005. After this festival, we sat around and we were in a living room and we were like, what short movie should we make this summer? Because that was our thing. We were going to keep making these shorts. And everybody just kind of felt tired, and we're like, I don't want to make another short. It's time to make a feature. So for those of you taking notes, here's the one question that changed our lives from being short independent filmmakers to entrepreneurial feature filmmakers. Here's the question. Everybody ready? Given the resources that I have right now, what is the movie that I can make this year? Given the resources that I have right now, what is the movie that I can make this year? For some of you, you don't have any resources. So here's your feature film. You take your camera into your kitchen, and you turn it on, and you let it run for 70 minutes. And now you have a feature. It's not that exciting, but you could become a feature filmmaker tonight if you wanted to. Build from there. Come up with something interesting, compelling, artistic, and don't forget, you're an entrepreneurial, creative filmmaker. Moving forward, I'd love to tell you that we came up with the best idea for a feature. We didn't. We sat around. One guy was like, I got this idea for a horror movie. And we're like, horror movies are great. They're selling really well. He's like, yeah, but this is one about camp. And, okay, camp, horror movie, like that Jason stuff. And then they were like, no, actually, this one, I think it would be interesting if zombies attacked a camp for special people. Okay. Keep in mind this was some years ago. I've since done some work, and I'll show you some more. And every time I give this talk, I'm like, should I keep this in or take it out? And okay, who here has made a movie? Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the support, everybody. But here's the thing with this type of movie, and I'm seeing the response right here. Some of you are like, do I even want to listen to this guy anymore? And then some of you are like you're so enthusiastic, you can't wait to see it. And thank you. I know we talked horror movies for a second. That was my first feature. And by the way, the tagline, for those of you who can't see it, is sometimes heroes ride the short bus. This was at a time, I want you to know that many years have passed, and the special needs community has come back, and we've gotten emails where they're like, this is great. We thought you were going to be really derogatory, but you actually empowered these guys to beat zombies. And we did. We have all this like really cool ways that they're able to use the skills that they have to beat zombies. And the way I talk about it, it's like an Academy Award movie, but it's not. But what we did right with this movie is we didn't take the safe ground, right? A lot of you are like, I don't know if I should do that because my mom might not like that, or somebody in the audience, might hate me as a person. Or here's what we have here. You either like this movie or you hate it. There's very few in between when it comes to a movie like this. Very polarizing. So in everyday business, there's something called a USP. Has anybody ever heard USP? It stands for Unique Selling Proposition. So when you're talking to a prospective investor, you always have to think about general business language so they understand what you're talking about. Most of them understand the word hook, which is what you understand, right? Movie is, what's your hook? You make a movie that's just wrong. Well, you like it, you hate it, but you don't forget it, right? Nobody here is going to forget this movie. I still get emails similar to the question, where can I get this? I'm like, I'm really into distribution these days. I don't talk too much about this anymore. But it had some good elements. You had hot chicks with guns. You had zombies. And if you know the producers, you can cast yourself in your movie. That's what I did. And that was probably the worst decision for the movie because I'm monotone and I'm a really horrible actor. But if you guys ever need a horrible monotone actor, I'm your guy. And I know how to use nunchucks too, and that part's real. Once you know your hook, the next step is you have to target your target audience, right? Who is your target audience and how do you reach them? These days we have this really interesting thing called Google. So you just do a search. In this case, zombie movies. There's 35,700,000 people that are looking for zombie movies. Those of you that are nerds, there's even more concise ways to do keyword research and find out exactly how big your audience is before you make your movie. So find that one thing in your movie that's your hook, and then find out if there's an audience for it. If your movie's about purple pine cones, there's a far smaller audience for that type of movie. Keep that in mind. You don't have to get overwhelmed. When you get results where there's millions of results for that like really strong keyword phrase, like zombie movies, target the top 50 publications, both online and offline. So there's, in the case of horror movies, there's a lot of horror publications. If you had a tennis movie, you have tennis publications, race car movie, boxing movie. Think of those affinity groups that still exist. And I have a theory that if the magazine is still out there in the racks, that means that that group's still strong enough to buy a magazine, which means that the group's robust enough, which means that you have a real shot at targeting and direct marketing to that group. So make your list of the top 50 people, reach out to those people, and let them know that you're making a movie, and start to make friends. Start to make friends. So create a spreadsheet, top 50 publications, both online and offline. Reach out to those people. We'll get to that in step number 7. The next thing you got to do is get your movie out into the video-on-demand marketplace. Now, for some of you who haven't made your feature film yet, which is a lot of you, here's what you got to think about. Where am I going to take this movie when it becomes available? We discovered something at Chill called the social window. The social window is that time right after you make your movie, and even with your short films, you're getting this now, where people are emailing you, and they're like, I can't be at that festival. When can I get a copy of your movie? Anybody getting those emails? They want to see it. Every movie you make, you're going to have that group, that affinity group, those people that can't wait to see your movie. And the biggest response, the most typical response that filmmakers give those people is, wait a second, I'm trying to talk to distributors. I'll keep your email on file. Whenever I get a distribution deal, you'll be the first person I email. A year goes by. You finally get that dream distribution deal, or not, and you reach back out to those people, the ones that keep emailing you, and guess what? They've moved on. They have friends, family, financial obligations. They have a life, and that enthusiasm that they once had kind of waned. So during the social window, your goal is to get your movie seen and selling in a marketplace. And wherever you put your movie first, people are going to go there. So your most enthusiastic people are going to go and buy your movie, even if it's on the moon, if there's a way for them to get it. One of the things we discovered at Chill, and I'll talk about Chill a little bit because I work for them, but I won't make it an overarching Chill commercial. But one of the things that we discovered is over 50% of the people end up not just buying the movie during the social window, but they also buy merchandise with the movie. So one of the things that Chill did is they figured out a way to group the movie with merchandise. We call them bundles. So you buy the movie and you get the hat. In the case of our surf documentary, we see that a lot where people go and they see, oh, you have a Jack McCoy surf documentary. Oh my gosh, for $15,000, Jack McCoy is going to come to my backyard, have a barbecue with me he's going to come from Australia, backyard, have a barbecue with me, and then go surfing. That's amazing. But I don't have $15,000. But this $100 surf cabana looks pretty interesting with the movie. Think about that, because if you were selling your movie for $9.99, it would take you 10 people to make $100 in revenue, give or take, for you math nerds. Next thing that happens is you got all these people, once they buy the movie, they're going to be out there and they're going to be sharing it in the social space. So one of the things that Chill set up is a flow that I wouldn't say forces people, but it strongly encourages people to tweet and share their purchase out in Twitter, out on Facebook. And every time they do that, it has something in it called a Twitter media card. And that Twitter media card actually carries your trailer with it from Chill. And then people push play and they click buy now. You can actually sell short movies from this platform. For those of you that want to take your short movie out there, you wouldn't price them at $9.99 for just the movie, but one of your bundles, you could very well price it as much as you want to price it. So I leave that out there, and again, you can email me or ask me questions afterwards, and I'll answer them. Moving forward, however you sell your movie, you're going to want to have real-time sales data. Whenever you're out there, Amazon and iTunes and some of these other things that we're going to talk about, you oftentimes go through an intermediary, and it takes a little while to get your sales data. The reason you need sales data is you got to find out exactly where the sales are coming from, so that whatever money you have for marketing, you can always emphasize it and improve it. Anybody here of CreateSpace? You guys all familiar? Get your movie out on Amazon pretty quickly. Now your movie's competing with the big boys in a really big marketplace. You don't pay any upfront fees. You just get it out there. And finally, there's all these other outlets, and each one of these requires a little bit of tenacity on your part to navigate. There's two kinds of ways to distribute your movie. One is to get into these marketplaces. One is you pay somebody up front to do this thing called encoding and quality control, and then they deliver it to the marketplace. Or you make a deal, a traditional deal where people take money off the back end and they pay for all the encoding stuff up front, and then the first monies recoups whatever they paid. I don't want to get overly detailed with the nerdy stuff, but I want you guys to know, my point of showing you this is there's two ways to go with it. You don't have to give up the rights to your movie to get into the popular marketplaces. Step number 4 is you create your movie sales funnel. Early on when you create some sort of website for your movie, you have all sorts of bells and whistles. You got cast and crew photos, behind the scenes. You can probably download a PDF of your, trying to think, your press release. Right? You guys have websites for your movies? Lots of bells and whistles? Anybody set up Google Analytics on their site? All right, let's get to that. So, this thing called a conversion funnel. I'm bouncing all over the place. There's just like so much information I want to share with you guys, and then I keep thinking like I'm not sure. Like I try to get cues from the audience, and I'm just not sure which one of these is really landing. So I'm just if you're with me, I see a lot of you taking notes. Just nod and make eye contact with me. It's really a sickness, but it makes me feel better as a person. So I don't. This isn't my goal to like hit you with all this info, but I do want you to walk away from here empowered, and this is how you get to it. So think about anybody ever hear the term sales funnel or conversion funnel? Awesome. Some of you have. It's a theory that if you send a bunch of people to your website, if your goal is to sell a movie on your website, and you send a whole bunch of traffic to your website, this is my pantomime. They all come down a funnel. You get all these people in the funnel, and halfway through the funnel, they fall off. There's a lot of different places where they fall out of the funnel. What happens is you're going to have that. So there's two things that have to happen. One is you have to have a goal for your website, which is to sell your movie. And if they bail out of that goal, the next thing is you got to capture that name and email address. This is how we did it on our site. It was a really simple site. We start out with a banner at the top. We got some testimonials underneath. We have the trailer, and then we have a whole bunch of buy now buttons. We just kept it real simple. The reason we came to that conclusion is we set up this thing called Google Analytics, which allows us to monitor who's coming to our website and where they're exiting. And if you find that a whole bunch of people are exiting from pages that you set up that you thought were so pretty, but they're just like, they're coming there and they think it's pretty too, and then they leave and they don't buy your movie or join your mailing list, then my suggestion is to cut the pages. So just trim the fat, cut them out right from the start. And you got to keep what matters. So what matters are your call to action buttons, and you keep them real simple. Buy now. Tweet this. Just don't overcomplicate these websites, because again, when you go into this role, your goal is to sell your movie or capture them, get them on your mailing list. So here's what we did. We tested and tweaked quite a few things on that website, and we found by changing the colors and making the little button a little brighter, we got a 20% increase in sales just by changing colors, which is pretty significant. If you see there, is there any confusion over what we want people to do when they're on the site? It's buy now. But what if by chance somebody decides to click the About button and they want to find out more about this goofy movie? Anybody see a home button, like a button to get them back home? Where do we go? Oh, I guess we ought to buy now. This all came from testing, and we found that this kind of stuff improved the sales on your movie website. So watch those places where people fall out of the funnel. And in the event that somebody does decide to leave, for this one in particular, we decided to get them onto the Facebook friendship, and that's the pop-up that you see there. For those of you, and thank you. I like the audible response. I'm like, for those of you who think that like all I do are these goofy horror movies, this is a documentary. Anybody interested in documentaries here? Awesome. Same principles hold true. If you look closely, you'll see the same stuff. You see the name of the movie, you see your trailer right there, you see your buy now button, and then you see a way to capture information, a name and an email address. That little form you see up there is called an opt-in form. You put an opt-in form on your website to collect names and email addresses. Usually that opt-in form, if you're doing this professionally, is supplied by a third-party email marketing company that you'll pay money for. It's usually $20 a month. And the reason for that is you never, ever, ever want to send email from your own servers, from your own domain. You don't want to be like myawesomehorrormovie@gmail.com. And now you're emailing 400 people. Very quickly, two things are going to happen. Either Google's going to email you and tell you to stop it, or your emails are going to end up in somebody's spam folder. Not the least of which, those emails, because it's a business-oriented email, oftentimes do not comply with spam laws. So using a third-party service with a little thing at the bottom that says unsubscribe, click here to unsubscribe, is in line with spam laws that you have to abide by. This is something that I would like you to repeat, and no goofiness about it. Ready? My audience is my business. Thank you. Without an audience, I have no business. The reason why I have us repeat that is because you as entrepreneurial filmmakers are now responsible for sourcing, engaging, and exponentially growing your audience. Anybody have any idea when that starts? Just shout it out if you have an idea. Now, right away. Perfect. Right on. It starts now. It starts with your short film. Think of yourselves as Stanley Kubrick's, Kevin Smith's, Ed Burns. Any number of those guys are making movies, but the one thing that they have going for them, Stanley aside, is they have a very active, engaged audience who know them and know their work. You need to become like that. And if you don't quite know how to do that, it starts small, and it starts right here. You get a list, and you start building that list. And you start creating and continue to create good movies and good content, and just let them know that you're a real person. One person leads to 2, leads to 4, leads to 8. I can't do the math past that. Other things about Chill, we'll put a little promo tool on your website if you already have one, and you decide, I don't want to redo my website, then you just grab a snippet of code, put it on there, and then somebody comes and they hit a buy now button, and they start buying your movie, short or feature. Okay, step number 5 is refine your trailer and post it everywhere. The reason I say refine your trailer is that alludes to testing your trailer, finding out how to tweak your trailer so that it speaks to your intended target audience. One of the easiest ways to test that is you put it up on YouTube. There's 3 reasons I say YouTube over Vimeo. You can have it on Vimeo, by the way, but YouTube should be the primary place that you have your trailer. And it isn't so much for quality. It has everything to do with spreading word of mouth. Reason for that, the 3 reasons. Number 1 is they'll pay for bandwidth. So any of your enthusiastic fans can post and repost your video, and you don't pay for any of that. The second reason is YouTube is owned by Google, makes it the second largest search engine on earth. So if you tweak your metadata and your keywords, your odds of your trailer coming up in everyday search increases. And it can increase quick, especially if there's not a whole lot of other videos out there competing for your movie about, trying to think of a really, like your movie about, I wanted to say Purple Pine Cones, but I already disqualified that one earlier. That stinks when you like kill your own example early. Dead Scrolls. Thank you. Yes, if there's not a lot of competing movies for Dead Scrolls and that's what your movie's about, which might or might not be interesting, but it could be, your odds of that coming up in searches and people finding you increases by being on YouTube, which is owned by Google. But the third reason is word of mouth. Google has this social networking component to it so that you can actually read the comments and see what people are saying. So that means you can repeatedly test different trailers to see whether or not they're getting a response, whether or not your keywords are in line with the message you're trying to say, whether or not you need to completely overhaul your trailer, your messaging, or in some cases, the cut of your movie. Here's somebody on here, you can't see that, but they say this is the worst trailer I've ever seen, talking about that zombie movie again. And I'm like, all right. And then somebody else below them says, I agree. Here's the thing, that doesn't hurt my feelings. What would hurt my feelings is radio silence. I want to see that people are talking. Once again, no talking means no sales. Moving forward, the last thing that I'll leave you, especially with your YouTube trailers or your Vimeo trailers, and you're posting this everywhere, right, and people are spreading it on their websites and what have you, make sure you have a little something call to action, a little title card that brings people back to your movie website. So that should be the last thing in your trailer, call to action. And in your description, just to get overly nerdy, but you should have a link back to your movie website somewhere in your description, very early in your keyword description on YouTube. So it would be the link to your movie site. Cool. Step number 6. We're going to increase targeted traffic. Early I mentioned about this thing called the Digital Guide to Self-Distribution, the action pack that I have. I go into a lot of this stuff in great detail, but the thing to remember, and I know you're taking notes, and I know this is a little bit far out there. Let me just I'm going to turn around for a sec, sort of, but sort of not, because I'm trying to look at you at the same time. Yes? Number 6 was increased targeted web traffic. And so I came up with like a dozen things that you can do to increase targeted web traffic. Again, this goes back to the early theme that I mentioned. A lot of these are very cost effective, but they do require time. They do require you getting some people on your team that can help you achieve these goals, and it doesn't happen overnight. So I'm going to name these to you. I'll try to name them kind of slow for those of you taking notes, and for those of you who don't get all of it while I name it, I go into a lot more detail in the Indie Distribution Action Guide, and you can always email me. But it would be websites. So other websites that are geared towards your affinity group. You got magazine ads, press releases, blogs, pay-per-click, forums, pay-per-view, affiliate deals, cost per impression. Those of you that are into some of the new things out there, you got Pinterest, you have Facebook, YouTube, Reddit, Ask Me Anythings, newsletters, Twitter. I want to go into, I think it's a little bit unfair of me to say like, okay, well, here's all the cool things you can do, and then buy my stuff. So I think what I'm going to do right now is just go into a few of these while I'm talking to you, and then anything else, just talk to me later. It's in the guide. So remember early on when I told you guys to write down the top 50 people, publications both online and offline? This is where it comes back in. One of the biggest, most cost-effective, easy things you can do, but easy in the sense that it's easy to do, but it does take time, is to reach out now to those people that are on your list, whether they be editors at the magazines or the owners of blogs. And you reach out to them and say, I got this really cool zombie movie. You have a cool zombie blog. Can I send you a copy of it? And don't really expect anything in return, but just send them a copy of it. Guys and gals running blogs, bloggers, they always want more content. So even if it's the converse of that happens sometimes where people get word about your movie and they reach out to you and you're like, I run Jimmy and John's horror blog. You've never heard of me, but I'd love to get a copy of your movie. Send them a copy of your movie. It doesn't matter that nobody's heard of that blog or it's a small blog. It's more internet real estate. And you never know who's going to stumble upon that's going to drive people back to your site. So the top 50 publications, both online and offline. The other thing I want to dive into a little bit deeper are press releases. Press releases, when not abused, are a pretty good way to spread your internet footprint. Traditionally, you would think of a press release to say, I only write a press release when I have something incredibly newsworthy to say so that I get on to NBC. That's one reason to write a press release. And if you have a publicist you're working with, they would probably tell you the same thing. But now through press release submission services like prweb.com, as one example, you write a press release, you send it out, and they will actually distribute it. They'll syndicate it out on all these other websites through something called RSS, Real Simple Syndication. And for those of you that aren't particularly nerdy, it sounds like this. Real Simple Syndication. So somebody, in the case of a zombie movie, somebody that's running a zombie blog might have something set up to pull that press release because it matches the keywords that they're looking for content on their site. And now that small investment you made for one press release could end up on dozens or hundreds of websites. It's pretty cool. So you want to monitor your visitor data. You want to find out where people are coming from. The reason you want to do that is because you want to increase that traffic. And the interesting thing for us is there's two ways you look at it. You find out what websites people are coming from, but before you do that, you find out what search terms they're looking for to find you. In this case, they were looking for the name of the movie. What is that? Anybody have any idea what that tells you when somebody's searching for the name of your movie? Exactly. It means that word of mouth is effective. It means that they want to buy it. It means that you're getting some traction out there. And that's cool. because now you know that your efforts, both online and offline, are starting to do what they're intended to do, which is drive people back to that conversion funnel, drive people back to your website so you can make some more sales. And in doing that, you also want to look at your top traffic sources. Interestingly enough, for the weird zombie movie, Stumble Upon, that was one of our biggest traffic sources. Has anybody heard of Stumble Upon? This is where I'll dig just a little bit deeper for those of you, because you need to know what this is. Stumble Upon is a social bookmarking site. You find a really cool site, you're like, oh, that's a cool site. I'm going to stumble it. And now my 10 or so friends see that I stumbled it, and they may go check out that site. And when they check out the site, they're like, oh, that's cool, I'm going to stumble it. And now their friends see it, and their friends see it, and their friends see it. You can exponentially increase your web footprint just by greasing the wheels, greasing the gears at Stumble Upon. How do you do that? They actually charge 5 cents. For 5 cents, you can get a targeted, semi-targeted, pay-per-view advertising campaign going. So imagine I pay 5 cents because I have the zombie movie, and I see that you like zombie movies, so I pay 5 cents, and now it shows up. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to stumble it. And now you tell 4 of your friends. Well, now I just invested 5 cents, but I got 5 people to come back. So that means that was a penny per view, targeted stuff. 1 penny I'm paying to get somebody who may potentially buy my $9.99 movie or my $20 bundle or my $50 bundle. You see how this starts to work? And if they tell one of their friends, now you're telling 10 people, so you've only paid a half cent per person. And if they tell their friends, I can't do the math past that, but you see what this starts to do. You can grease the wheels, you get in Stumble Upon. So we go back to where I talked about earlier. When it all comes together, what we talked about is you got to build a following for life. It starts now. It starts with your short films. Short films lead to a mailing list. Your mailing list leads to feature. And so here's the steps. And I'm going to say these slow so you can write them down. You build an audience for your entire career, and you leverage that audience for all future projects moving forward. Oftentimes, that's represented in the form of money. Anybody here not hear of crowdfunding? Part of the reason why you're building a list of people isn't just to say, oh, I got a gazillion people on my mailing list. It's to say, dear Mr. Investor, I have 10,000 people on my list. Last night, I surveyed my list, and I asked them how many people would like to see my horror movie about dead squirrels. And guess what? 8,000 people responded and said they can't wait to see that movie. Anybody here disagree that that's not a stronger play than, Mr. Investor, I have this really great idea for a movie. I think it'll be good. What's stronger? I got a list of 10,000, 8,000 of these people are interested, or Mr. Investor, I don't know. Let's just try it and find out. Go to Sundance. We'll be rich. It'll really work out. The other thing, like I just mentioned, is crowdfunding. A lot of you are going to do a crowdfunding campaign. Maybe some of you already have. Who has? Who's done a crowdfunding campaign? A lot of work, right? Even for like a small amount of money. But one of the things it allows you to do is it strengthens your resolve as an entrepreneurial filmmaker. It allows you to test your concept before you dive in both feet first. It allows you to source your initial audience, which means that if somebody funds your movie, even if they do the dollar minimum, they're still going to tweet or share it on Facebook. And the average contribution people make, I hear 2 different things. Somebody told me it was 85, and somebody else told me it's 60. But it's a lot more than $1, which means if somebody invests $1, they tell their friends, maybe somebody in their friends comes back and gives you $60. It's pretty cool. And finally, it allows you to get the money. A lot of people think crowdfunding is just to get the money. It allows you to test your concept, allows you to source your audience and grow your reach. And then finally, when successful, you get the money. I know, moving into this thing, you're all like chomping at the bit. So here are those 5 questions I talked about earlier, and these are the ones you really want to write down. If we walk away today and there's 2 things you got to remember. One is you have to remember that your audience is your business, and it's up to you to source and grow your audience. Second thing is these 5 questions. Who is your target audience? Know this before you make your movie. How large is your target audience? With the example of purple pine cones, I've done the research. It's like under 100 people that are actually interested in purple pine cones. if you make $1 million movie, it's not going to pay off to market it to 100 people. How will you reach your target audience? We talked about quite a few different things today. It leads into the strategy. Some of them are more expensive, some of them are more time consuming. So what is your marketing strategy? And then finally, how many unit sales, how many video on demand sales is it going to take you to break even and begin to make this a profitable venture? Now, for those of you that are confused about this, and I know a lot of you are, this is where I kind of get into the nuts and bolts of a systematic approach to this. So the question is, what if there was a system that would help guide you through this step by step, easy to follow, so that you could get your movie out there, seen and selling ASAP, so that you could become, you find your film distribution strategy, you discover all these secrets that guys on the distribution side are praying you really don't find out, like some of that stuff I talked about earlier, like being able to skip the middleman to get out there. And the reason you want to do that is because you can potentially, getting started now, become your own independent entrepreneurial filmmaking rock star very easily. Well, easy in the sense that it's going to take some work, right? I know whenever you go into like this pitch, I want to ramp it up and be like, yes! Which is how I feel. But if you don't consider yourself to be an entrepreneurial filmmaker, if you're waiting for everything to come to you, then all the books in the world, the systems and all that stuff is not going to help you. So here's what I'm offering. I have this independent producer's guide to digital distribution. It goes into far greater detail than on a lot of the stuff that I talked about today. And every time I do these talks, I'm like, how do I make this like a special thing that you can't get anywhere else? So in this, you get a step-by-step action guide that talks you through a lot of this stuff that we talked about in far greater detail. You get MP3 audio tips, so if you're not sick of my voice, you can listen to me in your car or when you go on a run, or maybe when you're driving around with your wife or your girlfriend and you're like, hey, let's listen to this thing. So she'll love that. And you also get a Sell Your Movie Online course that I email you to give you step-by-step guides that come right in your inbox. A lot of people read those and then save them and then come back to them and email me later. But the big thing I think people like is you get a strategy session with me. It's a 60-minute strategy session. So if you go on my website after today and you're like, oh, how much does this guy charge for coaching and consulting? The consulting fees, it's $100 for 20 minutes. So what this is a $300 value. And for today, I put it together. If you add it all up, it would be normally $147. Of course, if you're coming out here to the HollyShorts Festival and you want to have a special deal, you cut that, which I did, and then you decide, well, what else can I add to it? So early on, I made this joke, but I did. I wrote a book. So you get a book. You get a book on top of this and the consulting. So it kind of looks like this right here. I'm trying to hold everything together without it falling on my head. And when you put it all together, here's today's special. Everything for $97. But that's not all. Wait, there's more. I know it's what comes next is on the order form. Christina has them. Could you pull them out and maybe pass them around? Just take one if you're interested. If you're not interested, it does not hurt my feelings whatsoever. Just pass it on. But on the order form, you'll see this thing that says digital download, $57. I would appreciate if you did the digital thing, because for the physical thing, that means that I got to ship things, and it's a real pain. And until it's all said and done, like it's a wash in terms of time and effort. So do the $57 thing. You can download everything. I can send you the email tonight with the special secret download links. You download it. I know every time I give these talks, there's somebody that absolutely wants the physical stuff. Physical stuff is on the order form too, but that's $97. So that is, it's available and it's coming around, and we have some pens for you. And now I'm gonna switch over to Q&A. Those of you just quietly fill out the forms if you're interested. If you need a pen, just let us know and we'll get you a pen. Here's some more resources. Go to freefilmmakingbook.com. You can get on my general mailing list if you're interested. Also, filmmakingstuff.com, the website that I mentioned earlier. And for those of you that decide that today's not the time to buy this thing, you can go to howtosellyourmovie.com, where it'll be a lot more expensive and you don't get the book or the consulting. But that's available for those of you that want to wait. All right, so I want to you guys have been so awesome. I want to answer any questions you have and make myself available. And I got time for this before they kick me out, so please, I'll start with you, sir. I'm saying that, yes. If you prefer digital downloads, a lot of people like physical. The physical is more expensive to produce, therefore it's more expensive. But if you're okay getting secret download links and reading it on your Kindle or your iPad or your computer screen or however you are printing it out, do the $57 one. It's faster. You don't have to wait in the mail. And I can get it to you by tonight or tomorrow morning via email. You're welcome. Yes, sir. I haven't. I've had anecdotal experience with it. I haven't ventured into it. And I don't explore it too much because those kind of campaigns add up really quickly. And they can be complicated, especially for people that aren't familiar with the space. So his question was, I'm going to make it a little bit more general for the audience, but should you pay and invest money in the next thing that Google calls you about or whoever calls you and says, buy this ad campaign? Some of these things can be incredibly effective. So in any ad campaign, I would want to find out what you're paying in terms of how much the ad costs to run. And then secondly, what's the conversion rate? How many of those ads do I have to show to people before somebody buys? So do I have to get it in front of 100 people for one person to buy? And if the movie I'm selling is only $9.99 and I spend $100 in advertising to get that $9 sale, it oftentimes doesn't make sense. With the caveat, some of this stuff, if you have a few hundred extra dollars, is totally worth testing. And I would test those things. Just know that they don't always work out. That's the beauty of it. Yeah, actually, I have it in the book. Yeah, I know, that's always the goofy response. What I use to come up with that is, one time I was sharing it with people, and I got a whole bunch of polarizing responses, is a polite way of saying it. But all I do for that is I take a direct mail, the old direct mail piece, the theory that if I send out X number of postcards, 1/10 of one person is going to come back. So I always, there's formulas that you can plug in, but I use a formula like that, and I always go for the worst case scenario. So worst case scenario is the smallest percentage I can think of buys. Then how many units do I have to sell to make that make sense? How many people do I have to get that in front of? And if the numbers don't add up, you know right away. That's about as much as I can tell you without showing it or ripping the page out of the book and be giving it to you. Yes. Sure. And thanks for the question. And everybody heard her question, right? So, as I mentioned earlier, and I hit on it briefly, but I said for some of these, you can pay money up front or you can give money on the back end. You can give a percentage on the back end. For places like Amazon, that's relatively easy to reach. Places like iTunes is relatively easy to reach. The way that you reach those marketplaces, which are huge, is you just go to an iTunes-approved encoding house. Bitmax is one, Premier Digital Services is another, Inception Media is another, and you pay them $800 to $1,000, and they'll encode your movie and deliver it to iTunes. And that's one of the ways that you can go. And now you're in business. Now you've become an aggregator, a sub-aggregator. If you're going out to VOD and some of the other markets that require a pitch, like Netflix and Hulu, oftentimes you do have to go through a middleman. Some companies, like some of the companies I even mentioned, have relationships with Hulu where they'll make a pitch on your behalf, and you just pay them some money up front to do that. Other places are saying, I have this great relationship with the guy at Netflix, and they want to pick up a whole slate of films. You can go to them and maybe negotiate a deal, but they're going to want something off the back end. So I know that it's a much broader question, and it's specific to each outlet, but some of them you can get to yourself, and you don't have to give anything on the back end. And what's your follow-up question? Just if you want to just email me, Jason, at Filmmaking Stuff, with specifics, and then we can just take a look at it and go from there. Yes? There are, and one of them is to get your movie in pre-order versus full sale. So some of these platforms have the ability to get your movie up into pre-order, so that people that are the most aggressive and most excited about your movie can fulfill and receive the gratification of making that transaction at a time when they want it. You know what I mean? But here's the caveat: if your goal is to land one of these big, multi-gazillion-dollar picture deals, which exist, but they're rare and more rare every day, you have to be very careful and tread lightly. So I wouldn't make it available on all platforms all at once. I would have it available one place and maybe have it available on your website and just limit it to that, pre-order only, that kind of thing, without going like a broad release. The last thing a distributor wants to see is your movie in Amazon and iTunes before they even got the chance to negotiate. The flip side of that is the zombie example that I used. We were turned down by a lot of distributors. We got a whole bunch of crappy deals. At first on the phone calls, this is what's going to happen to all of you. Your phone's going to ring. It's going to be a guy like me calling you up like, hey, man, I saw that great movie that you have in the festival. Probably haven't watched it. Probably watched the trailer. May have heard about it from a few friends. Looked at some reviews online about it. Took a look at your social media. All right, this guy has 5,000 people on Facebook and 6,000 Twitter followers, so he's socially active. That's good. That's less risky for me as a distributor. What else? All right, I'll just get this guy going. Hey, great movie. Got a great movie. Can we check out a screener of that? Send it over. And now we start to have that conversation about the next steps in the process because it's time for acquisition. You're going to get so many of these phone calls, you're going to feel like Quentin Tarantino, but it's really just some guy on the other end who has to get 20 films that month for his quota. And I don't mean to sell it that way, but that's the reality of it. This is your baby you worked on for 5 years. Now somebody wants to sweep it up and throw it on the pile with the 20 other movies that they're trying to distribute that month so they don't lose their job. So that's the reality. So what do you do on your end? Well, you figure out exactly what kind of deal and what kind of distribution strategy you want to have from the get-go. What's your best top A-list strategy? And then moving down, what other tiers are you going to go after? If you're going to go straight VOD, you can come up with that whole strategy. You can pay upfront money, get it into iTunes, get it into Amazon, get it on your website, put it on chill. Do the kinds of things that you can do right now, and then go out there and use some of these strategies we talked to just start driving massive traffic back to your point-of-sale website. And sometimes that may be a lot less headaches than trying to negotiate or navigate through a whole bunch of deals, which incidentally, I've seen the numbers, and those of you who have friends that have distributed features, probably every one of them complains about their distributor. And oftentimes it's not the distributor's fault. It's just really, at times, a complicated process to get a movie seen and selling. I still want to keep some real estate. We just developed this thing at Chill. I wanted to tell you about it today, but it's too premature. Well, I wanted to show you some slides. I can't, but I'll tell you about it. It's called Insider Access, and it's this thing that helps you grow an audience while you're still in production, while you're going into post, while you're going to the marketplace, and you're constantly engaging fans. And it serves as a hub to branch out to all of the different social media sites. This is why I need slides, because it would help make this make sense. Bottom line is people are now redirecting their URL to the Chill Insider Access hub and using that as their exclusive website for their movie. So to your point, I would say there's many different ways to have that hub, to create the hub. But in deciding how you're going to do it, one of the things I would always own is the domain name. So mycoolmovie.com or whatever the domain name is, use that. That way you can take that with you wherever you're at. So if you wanted to do it, and the reason I wouldn't fully recommend it is because you don't have a lot of control over it, but if you wanted to use Facebook as your movie website, you could get mycoolmovie.com and then redirect that to Facebook. I wouldn't recommend it for a couple reasons, Facebook in particular, because you don't have access to all the people all at once that are liking your movie, and a very small percentage of people that like a page ever go back to it a second time. And there's these stats out there that are just alarming. Same thing for those of you that are into Twitter. I think the stats are, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a small percentage of people only ever see your tweet. It's like 2.5% of people, whenever you do a tweet, actually see the tweet. So you want direct access to your audience. I mentioned a lot about, and I emphasized the newsletter sign-up, the opt-in list. My audience is my business. And the reason for that is you want to be able to send emails out and get directly to your customer base, your audience. Facebook and Twitter and some of the other many social media are good, but I would use them as tools to help get more people back to your movie website or your hub, somewhere that helps you collect that name and email address, because you're not going to just need it on this movie. You're going to need it on all movies moving forward. That's my response to that. Yes, sir. And then I'll come back to you. That kind lady over there, and if anybody needs pens, she has them too. Just raise your hand or motion to her. Yes, sir. I don't own it, and I don't run it, but I do work for them. Yeah, I mentioned that very early on. So no, it's quite all right. I'm the manager of acquisitions over there, and then I do a lot of these kind of talks too. Well, if we're talking about insider access, that's not quite available yet. But if we're talking about getting your short movie seen and selling, that's free. You just upload it. You come up with some of those merchandise bundles that I talked about. And the way it works is you get a gross 70%. So 70% of all sales. The 30% out of that comes our credit card transaction fees, refunds, and any sort of like crazy customer service stuff that you probably never want to deal with. That's what we take out of the 30%. So, yes. You set the price. So no, that's a good question, though, because knowing that Chill takes 30%, you need to price it accordingly. The one thing that I kind of hit on lightly, when I'm talking about the social window, this is a time when your movies, people want it the most. They're never going to want it as much as they want it in that social window. So you have the ability to charge a premium for the movie and the bundles, a few dollars more than you would normally charge if it was available everywhere. If it's available in this one place, it's people will pay that because they'll find the value of getting it before everybody else to justify it. And if you add some really cool bundles to it, that really make people like that. So, I would say that the average for a feature film is like $9.99. Short films are under $5. But again, we've seen the stats that for a lot of these projects, more than 50% of the purchases come for bundles. So going back to that surf movie, a lot of people are not, and it's $14.99, so it's pretty high by conventional standards, but it's not available anywhere else. And most people aren't just buying the movie, but they're buying the movie plus the hat, so they're spending $30. So if you can imagine going to a site and saying, I just want to buy this movie because I heard it's awesome because somebody else tweeted it. Oh, man, I can get this plus the movie? Now you sell that thing plus the movie. They have it forever. That's important to see. Yeah, it's a digital download and it's a stream. But your point about the hard copy, some people sell an autographed DVD, so they can download the movie bundled with the autographed DVD that comes in the mail, and now they're charging $30 for that experience. Because it's an autographed DVD and there's only 30 of them in existence, you can set the limit for how many of these things you want to sell. Now people are buying those. Well, in this particular case, and he asked a good question about piracy. I'm surprised that it hasn't come up earlier, but what we at Chill, it's DRM free, digital rights management free, which means it can play on any device. If I buy it and I want to send it to everybody I know, I can do that. We kind of follow the Louis C.K. model in the sense that not a lot of people do that, we think. But if you want to be a criminal, you're going to be a criminal anyway. If you want to put a movie on BitTorrent, you're going to put it on BitTorrent anyway. I can tell you that our zombie movie was one that actually got that's why I always use it. There's so many things that happened in that movie. It actually got bootlegged and ended up out on one of the BitTorrent sites, which then it landed on every site in existence. I was hungover one Sunday, and I was like Googling myself, which I do a lot, and I saw that I could watch my movie, and I started emailing all the partners. I was like, this movie's available. So we sent these cease and desist letters, because we thought we were lawyers one day, to the people that were illegally broadcasting the movie. And to our surprise, a lot of them complied, and they just stopped, and the movie disappeared. And to our astonishment, the sales started to go down. Now, I don't have any way to tell you that there's a correlation between piracy, for like a no budget crappy zombie movie and piracy and sales, but I think there was something to it. Do I have? I don't think the piracy is good. I don't think that it's helpful. That's right. Those are some of the theories out there. Yeah, and I don't have the hard enough data. The problem is with piracy, unlike pay-per-click advertising or pay-per-view advertising, there's no way to really track it. You don't know how people originally found out about the movie. So it's hard to say like, oh, it was downloaded illegally 100 million times and I sold 50 more copies because of that. There's no way to really know how many times your movie's downloaded. But sometimes it might be a good strategy. This came up in another talk where somebody said like, well, I thought about putting my movie out there and then just cutting out the last 5 minutes. And it's like piracy pollution, And if your movie's that good that people like want to see it in that format, maybe they'll pay the $9.99 or whatever the price is to see it. Yes. I don't know enough about that, but there's a few case studies out there like that are pretty astonishing. I get real careful in these talks because I don't want to go down any one road. This is one place where it's really up to the filmmaker to decide the route, but that's where your distribution strategy comes in, and maybe as a play, you go out there and you pirate your own movie. Maybe. There's these things called social media loops. We use that term a lot, and what it really means is when you get somebody into a transaction flow and they make a purchase on a movie, you want to keep the thing going. So 2 ways that we do it is, first is, once you decide you want to buy a movie and you begin the transaction, we immediately say, do you want fries with that? In the case of selling a movie, it's how many would you like to gift to your friends? So you have the ability for $5, $10, $15, $20, $50 more to gift it, G-I-F-T, to gift it to X number of friends. And we find that a lot of people click that and gift it to a few friends. Then the next thing that happens is, hey, you really like this movie, and it's always written in the first person, similar to Kickstarter. Help Jason Brubaker out. Help the famed director Jack McCoy out, and tweet this and share it through Facebook. So in the transaction, you're tweeting and you're sharing it. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, all of the tweets contain the Twitter media card, or on Facebook, the Facebook graph, which plays the trailer in any of those shares. But it doesn't just play the trailer in social shares. Every time that trailer is played, there's a big buy now button that brings people back to your landing page on Chill for your movie. So that's what we call the loop that just keeps people coming back. And so if you have a movie that's compelling enough that people like enough that they keep sharing and sharing and sharing, they keep coming back. We just launched the movie with Insider Access, which operates with the same loops. The movie's in production right now. It's kind of going back to that example I gave earlier. We're seeing tweets literally every 5 minutes. People are tweeting about the movie. And nobody's paying for that. That's real social shares that are happening. So that's why I get so pumped up and excited about this, because I'm seeing it happen. But it has to be the right movie, and you have to have the right strategy. And it begins with this kind of conversation and these kind of questions. Oh, yeah, there's trailers. There's an embeddable trailer. So going back, and you still have to incorporate your own marketing strategy into this. But in the case of Chill and how that would work with what I talked about, remember early on those top 50 blogs and websites and publications? Because you're creating relationships with them, then you go over to them and say, here's the trailer of my movie. Would you mind including this in any press about the movie? And now they play the trailer with a big buy now button. And now anytime somebody shares that trailer, shares that article, you're going with them. Yes, for iTunes, so the process for iTunes is twofold. One is you have to go through a very rigorous encoding and QC process with an iTunes-approved encoding house. The second part of that is it has to be delivered from that iTunes encoding house to iTunes. When it gets over to iTunes, Apple does another internal QC to make sure the encoding house did everything they were supposed to do. The other name that you often hear is an aggregator. Most encoding houses are aggregators. Most aggregators are sub-aggregators working with an encoding house that's the primary aggregator. I know it sounds even, it gets a little bit confusing. My suggestion, having worked on that side for a while, is just go straight to one of those iTunes-approved encoding house and pose the same question to them. how are you going to get my movie to iTunes, and what's it going to cost you? So check out, again, the companies I mentioned, Inception, BitMax, and Premier Digital Services. They all offer something like that. And Chill does that stuff as well, by the way. If you put your movie on Chill, we're looking, because we're gonna pay for all that stuff, we're looking for the movie to at least generate $10,000 in revenue, and then we start having the conversation about taking it out to other places. And it's always the risk to reward. From our perspective, this is obviously an entrepreneurial filmmaker who knows what they're doing. Let's have that business conversation with them and see if it makes sense to take it out. And if it doesn't, well, then you can just take, $1,000 and go do it yourself. You don't necessarily need us for it. Chill.com, CHILL.com. That's a good question. So specific to Chill, order fulfillment, which is similar to Kickstarter and Indiegogo, you would fulfill your own orders. So earlier when I said that Chill takes the 30%, just keep in mind that you would want to price it accordingly, because you're going to have to come up with that T-shirt and do it. Similar to what I said earlier, even with your movies, I would stick to as many digital downloads as you can. Instead of maybe sending out the soundtrack to your movie as a CD, you might want to just make that a digital download, and Chill allows you to do that. Or if you have some behind-the-scenes footage, that could be a bundle. So movie plus behind-the-scenes footage. Think of it similar to your extras that you used to get on a DVD. Now those extras still have value, but you just package them differently. Anybody else? Oh, yes. Some of those movies are really tough. The way that you would slice them, and this is kind of reverse engineering from the distribution side. Like if we were to acquire a movie like that, let's say it is like Little Miss Sunshine, the first thing we're going to ask is like, who's this for? Who's the audience? These are literally the questions we ask ourselves. What's the social? Okay, so this filmmaker has a movie that's a character-driven dramedy, right? Not quite a comedy, not quite a drama. And you're like, oh, man. And then, okay, well, they have no social, and it's hard to figure out who the audience is. Okay, who's in the movie? Because maybe we can market from that angle. Oh, Steve Carell's not in this movie? So now we're left with something that, going back to my earliest point up here, is a lot of people are making movies, and I would tell you that so many people are making those kind of movies. And I think you need to make those kind of movies, especially if that's like your artistic need to get that out. But I would say always hedge your bet and think about it from a distributor's perspective. How are they going to sell it? If it's a movie that's really tough to kind of say, okay, it's not about skateboarding. Okay, it's not about boxing. Okay, it doesn't have that star talent, and you don't have 50,000, people on your mailing list. Now we're talking like that becomes a real risk. And there's a lot of movies like that out there. There's a lot of movies that these filmmakers think that just because they get on the iTunes or Amazon, it sits out there and collects virtual dust. You don't want that to happen. So I'm not saying not to make those kind of movies. I'm just saying, like, figure out a way to remove that risk. Figure out a way to remove those unknowns, And it could just be as simple as going out in this early research and finding other similar movies from popular filmmakers that have a huge mailing list that wouldn't mind talking to you, that wouldn't mind marketing your movie, that wouldn't mind helping you out. And maybe they've already blazed the trail, and maybe they can help you. On Chill, we have a lot of documentaries, and for a lot of the reason that I mentioned. And if you look at the history of Netflix, it's kind of the same. Documentaries are I won't say they're easier to market, but if you know that your movie is about anti-smoking, now you have a point of view and you know exactly what it is. And there's tons of affinity groups that you can reach out to and say, hey, we got this documentary about anti-smoking or documentary about surfing. So large percentage of documentaries, because they're low risk. Oftentimes the filmmaker didn't put millions of dollars in, so they don't have to recoup as much. Let me just go back. And I know like these folks at Hollywood, HollyShorts here, are so nice and generous. We ought to maybe wrap this up. I think we're probably running low on time. You guys have been awesome. Can we give them one more round of applause? They really helped out today.